Now to a shocking little story from Western Australia. As someone who studied parks and wildlife management back in the day and worked in national parks a lifetime ago, I know you don't want parks managed by environmental activists or hippies. You need a range of people who have practical natural resource management skills. They need to be good communicators, good people managers. But you do expect them to be conservationists, for sure. You expect them to support the aims of the organisation, which is why some people in Esperance in Western Australia are a little dismayed about the man appointed as the district manager of their parks. Jewell Crossberg is his name, and here he is, the man appointed by Western Australia's Department of Biodiversity and Conservation. When locals saw these pictures on his Facebook page, you could hardly blame them for thinking this is not what they would expect from an Australian park ranger. So they sent a letter off to Channel 9, who reported on the issue.
We are so disappointed to see Mr Crossberg is not a true conservationist and shouldn't be in a position of this standing. The photos date back to 2010 and appear to be at a game ranch in South Africa where hunting is legally allowed. But just hours after inquiries by 9 News, Mr Crossberg's Facebook page was deleted.
Yes, we know this sort of hunting is legal in Africa. We know in most cases it's managed with conservation authorities, and we know it generates money for parks in Africa. But the point remains, do you want national parks in Australia run by someone who gets a thrill out of shooting a giraffe or an elephant? I understand the concerns of the locals. The department is standing by its man who got the job on his merits. So for now at least, the hunter stays on as the wildlife keeper. And let's skip across the Nullarbor now and catch up with the Shadow Environment Minister in Western Australia, Steve Thomas. Steve, thanks for joining us. At the top of the program, I brought people up to speed with this story about Jewell Crossberg, the big game hunter, as a national parks manager. Is this good enough?
Well, it's not good enough that it got through without proper scrutiny, Chris, and thank you for raising it. The minister has been in hiding for 24 hours, but he has finally come out today and said that he will look at the appointment of this gentleman and see whether his appointment as a regional manager down in Esperance in country WA is appropriate. And I'm pleased that he's taken that step, because for the first 24 hours, the minister was in hiding as much as Mr Crossberg has been in hiding.
Well, the Minister is Stephen Dawson, isn't he, the Labor Minister for the Environment? No doubt this would never have gone across his desk. This would, as an appointment that would have been approved by the department. Would you think it's common for park rangers in the Western Australian conservation to be involved in big game hunting?
I would think it'd be very unusual, Chris. I mean, the people involved in conservation in DBCA, it's a terrible acronym, but a good department, are generally very committed to the cause and very committed to conservation. Now, I mean, this is an incident that's happened some time ago, and hopefully it'll be assessed. Mr Crossberg may have grown out of that particular phase of his life and might be more committed now to conservation. But the minister needs to have a look at this. He's agreed that he will have a look at that. He came out on radio this morning and said that the images made him nauseous, made him sick. And I think that everybody who has seen the images would suggest that they're completely inappropriate for somebody in that position. The question is now, moving forward, whether to assess whether this is the right person now in the right job for conservation in Western Australia.
I've got to point out, of course, we'd like to speak to Jewell Crossberg if he'd like to have a chat and give us his side of the story, but he would argue that he's still a conservationist. He would say he's not done anything illegal. This is just something he's done 10 years ago, and he had those pictures on Facebook. So, I mean, you'd hardly be in a position, would you, as a government department, to dismiss him or not to give him this job?
Well, no, and I'm not actually calling for him to be dismissed, Chris. I don't think that he should lose his job without a due and proper process and have a look at it. It may well be that he is the most qualified person for that job. I mean, it's in a reasonably remote area of Western Australia down at Esperance. It's one of the most beautiful patches of Western Australia, particularly along the coast. There's some important environmental assets down there. And it's also a great place to visit. And my in-laws actually live there, so I spend a fair bit of time down at Esperance. We're not calling for him to be dismissed. We're calling for the minister to review the appointment to make sure that he is the most appropriate person, test out his bona fides. Chris, as I understand it, like I say, this was a fairly old post, and it also potentially relates to farmed wild animals who are bred for hunting, which is very different than the case of either illegal hunting or hunting of endangered species in the wild. Now, that's not to say I personally approve of farmed hunting and lodges that sell that particular product. But we need to remember that. Sorry, you go.
Yeah, no, it's just hard to think of someone being a conservationist and being proud of shooting wonderful animals like that. I suppose we all ought to be grateful that, as far as we know, in the national parks around Esperance, there are no zebras, giraffes or elephants.
No, they're extremely rare around Western Australia, Chris, and it's been a long time since I've seen elephants roaming over this area. We like to exaggerate perhaps a little in Western Australia, but I think an elephant is probably a step in size too far.
Steve Thomas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.
Steve Thomas, who's the Shadow Environment Minister in Western Australia. I mean, those pictures, I don't understand it. Let me know if you do, but there you go, he's a park ranger.